Welcome to another episode of The Office, where our door is always open. Thank you so much for joining me. You know, we often hear the conversation about work ethic, and we hear people say all the time, our employees these days have no work ethic. But are our leaders setting the right example as it relates to work ethic? Are our companies enforcing the right policies as it relates to work ethic? Are our parents instilling the right values in our children as it relates to work ethic? We'll be discussing these things and more, and I'm joined by my friend and HR colleague, Mrs. Charmaine Anthony. She's been on The Office here before, and like I told her, she had to come back. So here she is. Charmaine, welcome again.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, it's always a pleasure. When we start to talk, it just goes...
Yeah, the time just really runs, and
yes.
I think, you know, it's really always interesting to meet with you, even offset, when we can catch up and have some really good discussion on some of the topics.
Yes. And we do need to talk about that topic you shared on Facebook, but that's for another show.
Absolutely. I'd love to have like a panel discussion or
absolutely.
Something on that. Yeah.
All right, so thank you so much for joining me here for us to talk about this work ethic situation, because I think it's very important for us to have that conversation and just highlight some of the concerns that we have, especially from an HR perspective. All right, so first of all, I mean, what is your view on work ethic generally from an HR perspective? Do you see an issue? You know, we hear a lot of people talk about it's getting worse. Do you think that's the case?
Well, in the last few years, I can say yes, we've seen a decline in the general approach to work and how, you know, we conduct ourselves, you know, as individuals, as employees. Some of the challenges that we are seeing are, you know, it's heightening, and it's really concerning that our younger employees, you know, there's a lot of work to do with them. The issues that we are seeing in terms of punctuality, regularity at work, productivity even while they're at work, and that is not isolated strictly to the younger workforce. However, there are quite a few challenges, you know, that needs to be addressed, especially starting at the bottom with the youth. And, you know, these are issues that I think that needs to be channeled and addressed, you know, through different institutions before they enter the workforce, because, you know, are they really prepared? The question is, are they really prepared for the workforce? Do they really understand the expectations of employers, you know? What is the school system doing? How are we helping at that level? What is the community's responsibility? Parents, what are you doing, you know? How are you guiding your children? Because what you find is that you have a lot of young people coming up. They are the future of this country. And what, you know, we need to prepare a country for them, and we need to prepare them for this country. And so it is really, sometimes, some cases are really disheartening, especially when we see students who have gone through, you know, the various levels of education, and yet, you know, the challenges are still exist.
Well, in some cases, they go through these various levels of education, but they're still not ready for the real world.
Absolutely. So therein lies my point about what is the school system doing to prepare, to adequately prepare our young people to enter the workforce. And so, you know, these are some of the things that, you know, really... But I won't say bother me, but these are some of the concerns that I have when I assess young people coming into the workforce now.
All right, we do need to take a break, so when we come back, we will continue the conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
The Office is brought to you by Renwick & Company Limited, Multi-Graphics powered by Expert Group and the Goddard Catering Group.
Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. Today we're talking about work ethic. And I'm joined by Charmaine Anthony. We're discussing this issue. There's no better person to have this discussion with. Charmaine, I think before we go any further, I want to just highlight, when we are talking about work ethic, what are we really referring to? You know, for our viewers who are not quite sure how to break it down. when we talk about work ethic, we are relating, well, we're referring to a set of moral principles that an employee uses while they're doing their job or while they're employed. And these are reflected, by certain traits that we as HR persons will look for when we are recruiting. So can you share with our viewers some of those traits that you look for when you're doing your recruitment?
So one of the highest things on my list, you look for characteristics such as, you're taking accountability for your actions, how responsible you are as an individual, respectfulness, how do you approach people, do you, in terms of respecting those in authority as well as your peers, being the type of person who is dependable. Would you turn up for your shift? Would you be the type, exactly, would you be regular and punctual at work? Would you be the type of individual that maybe, you simply got up this morning, you didn't feel, you just didn't feel like coming in? Would you be that type of person who is committed, to be at work and to always give your best, not just to turn up again to be productive while you're there? Are you the type of person who take on, a sense of responsibility for the job that you have? Are you an ambassador for your organization? Are you the type of person who would go out there? If you come to me for an interview and we are discussing your previous employment history, and I get the sense that you are speaking negatively about your experience. I'm not saying that you can't have negative experiences, but how do you convey those feelings and sentiments? So these are some of the things that will help me determine whether this person is the right fit for my organization, and whether, they have, the type of work ethic that I am looking for. Yes. Yeah.
It's good that you mentioned that thing about the interview and, how they speak about their previous employers, because that's an issue that I've found as well in doing interviews. Persons don't necessarily understand the line, and they can cross it, in terms of how they refer to their previous employer. And I think our candidates out there need to be mindful of that, because it can reflect very negatively on your character, your personality, in terms of whether or not you get this job. Because what's going to stop you from bad talking us if we were to hire you, is what an HR manager would be thinking, having listened to you rant on about your experience. Yeah, so you're right. Yeah. Okay, so one of the others, in addition to what you've said, I think is passion. And you covered it in some of the points that you raised, but you want somebody who's going to demonstrate commitment and passion for the job, because you want somebody who's going to have your best interest at heart as the employer, right?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. So before we took the break earlier, I had asked about, did you agree that there was a decline in work ethic generally in St. Lucia? And you said yes. What do you think are the contributing factors for that?
Well, I think it's multifold. I think, there are multiple facets that we can look at. We look at the individual in question, or the group of individuals, if you're really doing an assessment and trying to get into the bottom of a particular organization or a particular group of people. You can even look at the environment, the work environment. What exactly, and you said it earlier, are the organizations developing the right policies? Are they, is the environment encouraging people to be ethical, right? And so, in terms on a personal level and taking personal responsibility for your role, I think I have recognized or observed that over the past few years, I'm not sure what is driving this behavior. There is, to me, a sense that, we are almost kind of losing ground, if I should say, in terms of how we approach work, how serious we are about things. We are a lot more free. Like, we want to live, or we tend to approach life a little more. How would I say it? Carefree, exactly. So
there's more of a lackadaisical, laid-back attitude.
Absolutely. Generally, that's the feeling that I get. And even with speaking with individuals when, issues arise, how do they take the feedback, that sort of thing. And in some instances, you have to ask them questions like, do you have a family? Because this job is not just about you. The implications of losing this job is far-reaching. You have children who depend on you. You have a wife, you have family, and so you have bills, commitments that rely on you maintaining that job.
Right.
And so, you really have to make it personal for them in some instances so that they get the message. But just to get back to exactly what we were talking about and the decline in work ethic, you keep seeing like an increase in absence, sick absence. And I think
abuse of sick leave.
Absolutely, abuse of sick leave is an issue. I mean, we are not medical professionals by any means. However, when you start to see patterns, when you start to see, questionable behavior, around absence and so on, it really begs the question as to whether these are.
Charmaine, I want to share something. So somebody brought to my attention a sick leave certificate that was submitted. And on the sick leave certificate, a receipt. Was it a receipt? Yes. The person was on sick leave, and so obviously they had their receipts attached to their medical claim. And the receipt was for a sick leave certificate. That's what the receipt was for, which was questionable. Have you ever seen that? Because usually, you go to the doctor, so you pay for a consultation.
Absolutely.
And, if part of that consultation is that the doctor has decided you should go off on sick leave, he would then write a sick leave certificate.
Correct.
But the receipt said sick leave certificate.
That's unheard of.
So this is just, I was appalled because I was like, is that a new thing now? So now we're literally paying for sick leave certificates.
Wow.
So here is the abuse again coming in.
Exactly.
So.
And I think too, I don't think we really understand the implication of our actions.
Yeah.
Because when you're out, when you're constantly out on sick leave or absence, whatever the absence is, unplanned absence,
it has an effect on
it has an effect on the organization.
Yeah.
Not just that it cannot provide the service fully as it should, but what about your other colleagues? Do you care about your colleagues and the strain that it's going to place on them? Because
we have to take another break, Charmaine, so we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. We are discussing work ethic. And I'm here with Charmaine Anthony. And Charmaine, we've highlighted some of the issues that we face, some of the things that we're looking for when we are actually recruiting, when we're trying to measure whether or not somebody has good work ethic. And we also highlighted some of the issues. So we have the punctuality issues. We have, theft is also another issue, that we have a very, very bad case of theft in our organizations. But I think the question now is, what can we do as businesses to keep, to kind of avoid some of these things from happening? And one of the ways to do that is to introduce a code of ethics. So at least every employee understands what the expectations are from a behavioral standpoint. How do we handle certain key things, and what are the consequences? I think that's important. Have you had any challenges as it relates to maybe a breach of your code of ethics? Have you ever had to deal with a situation like that?
Absolutely. In my tenure as an HR professional in my career, I have definitely had instances where employees have, breached and have had to deal with up to and including termination.
Yeah.
So, of course, your code of ethics is a very, very important document, and it is something that will guide you even from your pre-hiring stages. So it will help you determine, some of the competencies and the values that you're looking for in your employees.
Exactly.
And it will help shape your recruitment process.
Yeah.
So that will help you in terms of aligning the right people to your organization.
It also helps to, mold and create your organization, the environment of the
Correct.
organization. So what culture are you
Correct.
creating in the organization stems a lot from your code of
Absolutely.
ethics. Yeah.
And not just having it, but actually implementing it and living it, right? Because in some instances you find we have those things and they sit on shelves and they
That's
just
right.
collect dust,
That's right.
and it doesn't really form part of the actual
everyday
life
life.
of the
Exactly.
organization until it's embedded and it's part of the culture, and it is who we are as a people, and it is what is accepted, and and people are held accountable
Yeah.
for living by those standards until such time, then the impact.
But
is-
key to that
is
is
minimal.
leadership by example.
Absolutely.
So it has to be led from the top down.
Correct.
And it's concerning to me that some of our leaders do not demonstrate the right ethical behavior. And I think that's unfortunate, because this is the example that we're showing to our younger persons. And you mentioned it earlier about our younger persons coming into the work environment and not necessarily being prepared for it. In a lot of cases, they're repeating some of the things that they see other persons who have been in the business much longer than they have, but they're not necessarily the right behaviors that they're repeating. So I think our leaders need to take stock and see and understand the value of the influence that they have on our younger
Absolutely.
generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, as a leader, you have those young persons coming in. How, what sort of mentorship, what sort of example are you to these young people? How do you show them that, your behavior is actually demonstrating what we are saying that we want in an employee? And, I have seen several instances where, you'd see that a manager or a leader, they're actually behaving contrary to what they want to hold their staff accountable
Exactly.
to. And so it doesn't work that way.
Yep.
If you have every single one of us are employees. We have different positions. We have different sets of responsibilities.
Yeah.
However, whatever the policy or the guidelines that has been set,
That's
it
applied
applies
to
to
everybody.
all of us.
Yeah.
And so it cannot be, a set of rules for some and
Yeah.
a set of rules for the others.
Yeah.
And that is one of the biggest challenges that we have, where when it comes to people actually remaining aligned with the policies and the guidelines set.
That is very true. Very, very true. And, it's unfortunate that these things happen, but it's one of the realities that we have to face. But I think there are certain components that, we would want to make sure that are covered within a policy, such as this one. And most policies would cover stuff like sexual harassment. So, everybody understands this is our position on the topic. This is what happens if there should be a case of sexual harassment. If somebody feels harassed in any way, this is the process to follow. A code of ethics would highlight that. Fraud is another thing. How do we deal with fraud? Do we have a zero tolerance? Do we go for the discipline, the progressive discipline process with fraud? Or is it that once you are found guilty of fraud, that's it, you're done? Conflict of interest, accepting gifts, and bribes and stuff. Like all of these things are covered in your typical code of ethics. But for the conflict of interest, I wanted us to touch on that, because I think this is an area where a lot of persons don't necessarily understand. And I wanted to touch on that. Sharon, what is your view? Because you see, some people do not appreciate that if somebody is employed with an organization and they are engaged in behavior or in another business that conflicts with that organization, they don't appreciate that there is a conflict of interest. What's your view?
Exactly. I too find it difficult to understand what's the difficulty in understanding how to separate and distinguish. Yes, because obviously if you are employed and you're engaged with an organization and they're in a particular line of business, and you now want to set up shop in that very same line of business, how do you separate yourself, the business owner, the entrepreneur of your personal business, and the employee of the organization? At that point, how much trust is now there? How does the organization trust that you are working in the best interest?
Yeah.
How does the organization trust that investing in you is worthwhile? At
Because
what point will
you're always going to put your interest first.
Absolutely.
But I think there's another point we need to highlight. In every employment contract, there's an implied term, the duty of fidelity.
Correct.
And that is where you are supposed to put the interest
of
your employer
Correct.
first.
Correct.
So when you put yourself in a situation where that becomes a little difficult to choose whether you put yours first or theirs, there's a conflict.
Absolutely.
And I think, there was an incident recently where I heard a lot of people making a lot of noise about, somebody being fired, and it was wrong for them to be fired because the person just wanted to create a new opportunity for themselves. That's fine. If you're working with an organization and you want to create a new opportunity, you want to become an entrepreneur, and you choose to go in the same field that your employer is in, that's perfectly fine, But you have to make a choice. It's either you leave and go to do your own, or you remain and commit yourself to the employer,
Exactly. And I think I know what you're talking about. And
yeah.
I'm not sure if are we out of time on this one?
Yes.
Okay.
We do need to take a break. When we come back, we can take the point that you were about to share. Okay, so to our viewers, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with us. So Charmaine, just before we took a break, you wanted to add to the conversation about the conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm. What I wanted to say on that is simply that as an employee, I am, like you said, there's an implied term in every single contract.
Mm-hmm.
And in many instances it is explicit. Mm-hmm. And so, it would really surprise me if this individual, I think I know, the issue that you alluded to earlier. It would really surprise me that this individual would not have been aware that, taking on that personal venture would have meant there would have been need to separate, right? And so, again, it goes back to what are we doing as a society to help people understand, and to really create that environment where we understand what ethics means and how it impacts the workplace, society as a whole, and just our country in general. What are we creating? What sort of
Well, I don't know, but I'm concerned, I'm really concerned for us because of the decline that I see, and it's more concerning when we hear persons in senior leadership positions being involved in, less than ideal behavior. Yes. The most recent thing I saw in the news, I think this week, was parents paying large sums of money, bribing for their children to attend college, certain colleges. So when people who are so influential in our society choose to buy their way through things, pay for confidential information, encourage employees to breach their contracts of employment to give them access to certain things, these things are questionable, and it's a shame. It is concerning.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
It's a shame that as a society that we have found ourselves where we are.
Yeah. And I see it happening more and more here, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the bad thing for me is that oftentimes we turn the blind eye.
Yeah.
It's as if it's not, especially if it's not affecting us immediately.
Yes.
So it's not. It has nothing to do with me. So
you just turn and
just
let
turn
it
a
happen.
blind eye, and just allow it to happen.
All right. Well, we're out of time. It was always, it's always nice having you, Charmaine. As we close, can you, share your thoughts on what can we do within our businesses apart from implementing our code of ethics and being very clear about what our expectations are as employers? What else can we do to address some of the issues that we have?
Like I said earlier, I think the issue of ethics is multifaceted. There is a sense of, for me, that I see a personal responsibility where the individual is concerned, and organizations too. One, we have already touched on the code of ethics. And two, for me, most importantly, is to hold people accountable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because how long can you continue to allow things to perpetuate? right? So that is one of the things that creates the multiplier effect in the organization, because if employees are held accountable and they realize that they're not going to get away with poor work ethics and behaviors, absolutely, they would think twice, right? If you make certain examples when things happen, they would think twice. Secondly, I think we have a responsibility to educate and empower our employees so that they understand. As organizations, how are we reaching out to the community? We are the ones ready to receiving those young people coming in. Are we going out there and, you know, being proactive and doing some work on the ground with the schools? Are we engaging at the community level to help create that change that we want to see in the workplace? You know?
All right, well, let's hope that we've given our viewers something to think about, and persons who are watching will, you know, take certain steps to address some of the things that are affecting us. And together, I'm sure together, if we just come together and share our ideas, we can come up with some solutions to the problems that we have.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much again, Charmaine.
It's always my pleasure.
All right, so we are out of time. Until next time, follow us on social media. Feel free to share any comments and suggestions that you have, and we'll be happy to accommodate. Okay, so until next time, take care.